I'm Patty Lackman, and I am Voter Service Chair of the League of Women Voters of Central Kane County. Welcome to tonight's Candidates Forum. Before we get started, what I would like to do is have everyone stand, and we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, the second thing I want to do is say welcome to International Women's Day. So I would like to have all the women in the audience and in the room stand up, please. Just so you know, without us, you wouldn't be here. Thank you. Tonight's forum will be in three parts. The first portion will be for the Kane County Board, Districts 11, 13, and 15. The second portion will be for the candidates for Kane County Clerk, and the final portion will be for the candidates for Kane County Sheriff. A little bit about the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation of citizens in government. So thank you for being active in your government. We sponsor such events such as this one so that you, the voters, are educated and informed on where your candidates stand on issues that are important to you. This is done in an open and unbiased setting. The League has very strict rules about how to conduct such events. As you can see, there are no signs in the room, and no, people are not supposed to wear any kind of name badges or whatever for their candidates. Each candidate has signed the League's forum participation agreement, which states that they will not use any audio, video, or transcripts of the forum for any source in campaign advertisements or materials for other partisan purposes. We are nonpartisan. Questions will come from the audience. Only written questions will be used. The questions will be reviewed for appropriateness and clarity by question reviewers from the League. I have two people up here right now, and we might be doing some switching. So I have Joan Lencioni and Eleanor Hamilton right now. The people that are picking up the questions are Jean Pierce, Chris Pakin, Terry Allen. I will be doing the question asking. This is not a town hall. This is a forum. The candidates get a minute to respond to each question unless we determine that not as much time is needed or we need to have longer. Marianne Nas, wave your hand, Marianne, is our timekeeper, and she'll keep a strict eye on the clock. She has paddles that will show 30 seconds and a stop sign. We allow the candidate to finish their thought. I hope it would be within a couple, maybe 10 or 15 seconds at the most, and then we will just cut you off. I know, it sounds, I'm a teacher. I can do that, right? I have the right as the moderator to stop the forum at any time. And as most of you know, the police department is right down the hall. So, candidates should not interrupt each other and are to remain behind the table during the forum. Opening statements will be 2 minutes, and then, as I said, each question will involve 1 minute response. Not all questions may be asked. Just know that the question reviewers are charged with putting questions together because probably 3 of you or 4 of you have similar questions, and they are charged with making the questions the clearest and most interesting or understandable by the audience. Please turn off all cell phones and refrain from making any verbal comments to the candidates. Tonight's forum is being filmed by BATV, and it is being streamed live. Mike, stand up and wave your hand here. We have Mike from BATV. And So it will also be available on YouTube. So with no further ado, what I would like to do is start with the opening. And I have the candidates in alphabetical order, not by district. So we'll start with Ms. Kanakula. If you would like to give your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Is this working? Or no? Can everybody hear me? Okay. I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for having me tonight, and thank you to my candidates.
Can we hear?
Now?
No?
Yes.
Okay. And thank you to my fellow candidates for coming, but most especially I want to thank community members for coming out and participating in democracy. I think that's wonderful. My name is Jody Kanakula, and I am running for District 11, Kane County Board. I live here in Batavia. I have lived here for almost 15 years. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have just recently started my own practice in August. I work mostly with senior citizens, but adults as well. The reason that I wanted to run is after the 2016 election, I just got really tired of complaining and not doing anything about it. So I became involved in my local politics and met a lot of people and discovered that this seat was going to be open. And I thought, well, now it's time for me to really step up. I hope to be the kind of board member that really listens to my constituents. I think that that's one thing that I have missed is I want to hear what concerns people. I want to hear what your opinions are. I want to hear what makes you mad. I want to hear what you want us to do. And I also believe that it would be my responsibility to keep you informed on what's going on with the board. I hope to put together a coffee once a quarter or a meet and greet so folks can come out and tell me what's going on and how they feel about it, and really be part of the governing, not just me going there and making the decisions for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis. And I will stop right now and say that there are people that are not behind the signs. All people were invited from contested races in the 11th, 13th, and 15th. So where there are signs and no persons behind them, that means that they have not responded, even though they were invited. Thank you. Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry.
So thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters. It's nice to see a full crowd here hearing this forum. My name is Philip Lewis. I am currently on the board, Kane County Board, representing District 13, which is the west half of St. Charles, a little bit of east part of St. Charles, and the west half of Geneva. So a very important area in our county. Interestingly, St. Charles Township and Geneva Township, well, St. Charles has the highest EAV in the Kane County, and so that means St. Charles Township pays the most in taxes to Kane County, and then right behind them is Geneva and Batavia. So it's a very important area. My background has been in industry. I spent 30 years in industry. I was with Fisher Controls. It was a Monsanto company when I was with them, and I managed North America for a division of Fisher Controls, which included 7 plants, 3 of them international, and I had about 1,500 employees working in the area that I managed. Monsanto sold Fisher, and I ended up finding myself with the Illinois Institute of Technology, IIT, and with them I was doing some consulting work around Chicago, and ended up being president of Durand Scales of Batavia, local company. And then I've since been with IIT as an adjunct professor, and I teach engineering management, engineering project management, and marketing and sales in the evening. I'm a longtime resident, our family is a longtime resident of St. Charles. In fact, my grandchildren are the 5th generation living in the Fox Valley. And I'm very pleased that we have 4 adult children, and the 4 families live in the area. And so, in fact, 2 families live in St. Charles. And then we have our oldest son is in Bartlett. But anyway, that's some background, and I bring my engineering talents and science and my long-time longevity in the area to the county board.
Thank you. Mr. Martin. Sorry, I'm behind the post here.
Well, I am John Martin. Thanks to the league and to all present tonight for participating. I and my wife and I, when Phil mentioned how long he lived in St. Charles, I was adding up the years. We've lived in Geneva for over 40 years. We have half of our kids live in Geneva, the other half live in Chicago. I was a practicing attorney for 40 years. I've recently retired and ran for the 11th district, and 4 years ago was elected in that capacity. I've served as for the last 2 years as chairman of the Judicial Public Safety Committee. I'm vice chairman of the Development Committee. I'm actively involved with the Human Services Committee and serve on a couple of Forest Reserve committees, in addition to the county board. When I ran, I did so with a commitment to continue on behalf of the 11th District the efforts to conclude the redevelopment of Settlers Hill, and as I'm certain you've all read and heard in the papers, that in fact has been done. Construction on the cross-country course will begin April 1st, and hopefully will be open for business on the 19th for the running season of 2019. The beauty of the project is that not only do we end up with a world-class facility, but we also have hiking and walking paths that, but for the short race season, will be available to the community for the balance of the year. I look forward, if I'm elected, to serve again, and thank you again for
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Strom?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the league for having this tonight. I appreciate it. My name is Lucas Strom. I'm running for the 15th district. This is my first time running. I am a longtime resident, and we were talking about how long we've all been here. I was born here. My family actually has a family farm that I own now. It's a Centennial Farm. So my family's been here since before 1900 and have owned our family farm on Route 47 since 1915. I own and farm that now. That's kind of my weekend job. My day job is I've spent the last 20 years in healthcare and agriculture technology companies, last 15 years in startups. The last 2 of those that both went public, one on the New York Stock Exchange, one on the NASDAQ, and I'm currently working with the fastest growing agriculture technology company in the industry, Farmers Business Network, and we're quickly growing that to a multi-billion-dollar company. That's my business background. I'm a father. We were talking about children. I have 2 children. They're still living with me, but they are 3.5 and 10 months. So I guess I'll give them a couple more years before I make them move out. But and my wife is an attorney. She just left the Department of Labor doing ERISA law to stay home and raise our kids. And so my kids will be our 5th generation on our family farm and 5th generation at our school district. So I'm running because I believe our district needs a little bit more leadership, a little bit stronger voice, and a little bit more business acumen and background, and that's what I bring to it. And I believe that I'm a very moderate Democrat, and a Democrat that not only can win the primary, but can win the general. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strom. Mr. Weber?
Yes, hello. Thank you again for the League of the Women's Voters for having us here tonight. My name is Steve Weber. I am a 14-year resident of St. Charles, Kane County. At some point, I will be a 40-year resident. It's just going to take me time to get there. I can't speed that up. Personally, I've been married for 20 years. I have 3 kids. I am the vice president of sales and marketing for a wholesale distribution company in the Chicagoland area. I report directly to the CEO of the company. We do north of $200 million in sales, so the budget, the size of the King County budget is something that I'm very comfortable with. I deal with financials on a day-to-day basis. I'm a veteran. I was in the military for 6 years, so I've served my country, and now I feel like it's time to serve the District 13 of Kane County. I can't say anything bad necessarily about the way that the district has been run. I just feel like it's time for some new energy, some fresh ideas to keep moving the agenda along. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to question number 1, and we'll start with Mr. Lewis. What do you see as the biggest issue facing the Kane County Board?
I think we've had budgetary issues for the last 3 or 4 years or so, and that continues to be one that faces us. And it causes all departments get involved in this issue, and it requires good cooperation amongst our organization. We've got a $285 million budget, and we need to continue to improve the efficiencies in our government. And one of the things that I've been involved in fact, I was one of the sponsors of the court case management system, which is bringing excellent technology to our judicial system, which is important because it's 68% of our general fund. And we need to work with our departments, have them cooperate with one another, and continue to achieve a balanced budget and a flat tax levy.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Martin.
I agree with Phil that the budget is going to be our issue for the next 4 years. We have increasing difficulty in obtaining the money that we should be in reimbursement from the state. We have shrinking sources of revenue. For example, the Elgin Riverboat Fund used to provide us with about $8 million a year. That's down to $3 million. I could go down the list. So we have an obligation to our constituents and to the county to make the best decisions we can with our limited resources.
Thank you. Mr. Strom.
Budget's obviously the easy answer, right? I mean, the budget's going to be an issue every year. It's an annual budget. So we have to continue working. We've had a levy freeze, which I think was necessary, and it might still continue to be necessary. If you look at the spend, and if you look at the consultant document that was produced in December, if you look at efficiency, I'm actually quite pleased with where our efficiency is. There's always obviously areas to improve, but if you look at and compare us to DuPage County, DeKalb County, and the other surrounding counties, we're actually relatively efficient if you go across the departments. My main focus is making sure our sheriff's departments and our safety and those departments have what they need to provide the services that we all expect in this county.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
With the as Mr. Martin touched on, with the state, issue with funds with the state, whether it's getting reimbursed or us trying to get grants, we're going to be, some of the issues we're going to be battling are going to be, with insurance. Insurance rates are always going to be going up, whether it's with employees as well as pensions. So as we look at budgets and as things grow, we have to be very careful on how we grow as a county, whether it's with personnel or with spending. So we need to constantly be mindful of adding programs. We want to keep as many programs as possible. Obviously, we want to keep the citizens safe as much as possible, but we have to be very cognizant of how we fund those programs long term.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula.
I agree that the budget is extremely important. Obviously, the Kane County Board members are supposed to be good stewards of the money that our citizens are giving us. I think for me, the bigger issue, the overarching issue all the time will be the quality of life for the citizens in Kane County. How we spend that money is absolutely critical. Are we using a machete to cut the budget, or are we really looking at how and what we are cutting and what are the consequences down the road? I know that there are a lot of things that we need to be planning for quality of life. And I would hope that the board would be looking at those things and how we're going to fund things, not just now, but in the future, and which things are going to improve lives for all of us.
Thank you. Question 2, and we'll start with Mr. Martin. Do you support the county spending money on crisis intervention training for police?
Yes.
Any additional comments?
Not really. I mean, it's number one. It's an important tool in public safety. Number two, our state's attorney has been diligent in seeking grants to in fact do that, and I'm totally supportive of that activity.
Thank you. Mr. Strom.
Yes, short answer is yes again. But, and that's why I brought up the safety in the answer to my first question. I want to make sure that our Sheriff's Department and our courts have the necessary money for the necessary services to render. I mean, the incident that happened in Delnor was terribly unfortunate. The piece of the budget that was voted down on the GPS ankle bracelet locations to reduce costs of jail time, that was voted down last year, and I think that should be reinstated. So there's certain things that we need to spend some money on that's reasonable, that will keeps us safe and provides the services that we expect here in the county.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Yes, absolutely. Any kind of crisis prevention like that is very important. Obviously, it's important to the safety of the residents of Kane County, but also within crises, there's the potential to open ourselves up for litigation. So by being proactive in funding programs for education on that, it can protect us in the long run.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula.
Yes, I agree. I would find it hard to understand how anyone couldn't agree that training for our police is not something to support. I think our police need a lot more training. As a licensed clinical social worker, I would like to see more mental health training for our police across all age groups, for adults and children and seniors, how to handle those particular crises. I think that makes them better police officers. I think that makes our society safer, and I think it makes a better place to live. So I would support looking for sustainable ways to fund more police training. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
Crisis intervention is part of the toolkit of public safety. And, it flies in the same vein as improvements that come along from technology and other places where we can adapt our forces and include those new practices and implement them in our community. And crisis intervention is one of those things. 24% of the people who are incarcerated in our jail have mental issues. And so the thing is that when our public safety folks encounter, they're on the street, their first engagement, and they need the kind of background to recognize what degree, what the severity is of the situation they have. And so it's absolutely required, and as far as I'm concerned, we need to fund it. I believe we have the funds to fund it, and we have been funding it. And I also would just comment on the GPS monitoring system. As it turns out, we did have the funds to continue that program. We should have continued that program, and it's an example of public safety, a new resource we have that we can implement here in Kane County and manage it. Thank you.
Question 3, starting with Mr. Strom. Mental health services are important to all and very important to some jail inmates. Do you support funding for mental health services in the jail?
Well, that's an easy question after the conversation we just had. Absolutely. Mental health is something that touches many of us, whether it's someone we know or it just affects our community. And so, and obviously there's been a spotlight on mental health issues for some of the stuff nationally, some of the unfortunate situations we have nationally. So I think mental health is something that we're still understanding, and we definitely want to put the latest and the best resources to that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Webb.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, as far as the mental health, funding programs for them is so important. As Mr. Lewis touched on, the percentage of inmates that have mental illnesses that are incarcerated, if they were recognized earlier and treated properly, that number would go down drastically, which in turn would save us money, for jailing those people, arresting those people, all kind of services. It would make a big difference if we got ahead of it and we're proactive in that department.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula.
Well, obviously, as a social worker, yes, I think that we do need to provide mental health services to inmates. Of those 24%, almost 100% of them will have trauma backgrounds. And trauma-informed care is on the cutting edge of mental health right now. Providing that kind of mental health care, specifically targeted at trauma and treating the trauma of those folks, along with some really innovative programs through the Sheriff's Department, hopefully can help those folks not come back into the system, which is what we really are hoping for with the mental health programs. We're not just looking to, give 6 sessions of therapy and they feel better. We're looking to help folks become functional when we provide mental health services. I would advocate to really hone in on trauma.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
I think in my previous comments, it's certainly, I have a heightened awareness of it. And generally, an incarcerated person is diagnosed with a mental issue. And what we need to do as a community, and this is a King County community, we need more public awareness of this. We need to involve our medical community, because when these folks move back into our community, they're incarcerated in the jail now, but they will move back into our community. And we need to have a proactive program to deal with, to assist them in our community. And so that's what needs to continue to be involved, and hopefully we'll have the Cracker Jack program here in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
I, of course, am supportive of the effort. What we need to do, in the sense, as Phil just mentioned, is it needs to be recognized as a community issue and not just a issue that involves the sheriff's office or the state's attorney or anything else. And it needs to be looked at in a holistic sense, where we face these issues before they end up as being problems and that end up with people being incarcerated.
Thank you. Next question, which is along the same line, only it's money related. Mr. Weber, you're first up. Do you think that mental health should be funded in part through the county's budget? And this is not exclusive to the jail. It's mental health for people incarcerated, detained, or out on the streets.
Yes, the county should definitely be proactive in a program like that. As I mentioned before, by being proactive, it can save us money. And I think there's probably enough studies out there to correlate between keeping people out of being incarcerated by treating them properly can save us money, so that money can be reappropriated into that program.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula.
Certainly, I think it is a community issue, and it's something that touches all of us at some point in our lives. Mental health is not really something that afflicts just a few of us. Mental health is something that we all will struggle with at some point. I would like to see more community initiatives, and I would love to see the county be cutting edge in this. Imagine if we were cutting edge in providing mental health care in the state. How proud would we be? How safe would our residents be? And there are a lot of grants out there to help. I mean, trust me, we social workers are really cheap. So, bring it on. There's a lot of us that want to help, and let's make King County a beacon of programming for mental health. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
I think, please be aware that St. Charles has a 708 mental health board, and my wife, Maureen, was one of the board members on that. I've been married to Maureen for 50 years, by the way. And Geneva also has a 708 mental health program. And we need to have those same kinds of programs in every community in Kane County. We do not have them in every community in Kane County, but we could have them. And we just need to improve our response to people who have these kinds of issues and be more proactive about it and be better at it.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Well, and to repeat basically what I said before, it's a community effort, and it needs to be looked upon in that manner. There are local boards and groups that deal with it, and we need to deal with it as best we can. And but we need also to recognize that we have resources that have a finite limitation, and so it's a balancing act. It's very important that we look to mental health, but we need to spread this obligation amongst the individuals in this room and the governmental bodies in this county to make certain that we do it in the most economically efficient manner.
Thank you. Mr. Strom.
Not to sound too repetitive, I think the two things I want to highlight in addition to everything that's already been discussed, because I think we're all relatively in alignment in just how you actually execute it. I think the two things that I'll mention in addition at the end here is we talked about in part what the board can do, and I'm a strong believer in private and public relationships and partnerships. So I think there's a lot we can do, like with our hospital organizations and with our non-for-profits and their 708s and that kind of thing. So that's important. I also believe, and since I spent 15 years in it, and specifically around population health, disease management, and worked with a lot of social workers, that the earlier you catch it, the better. So I would love to even entertain the idea of working with school districts and getting into our schools and helping identify stuff earlier. So,
thank you. Now on to a different topic. There's kind of there are three parts to this question. And we'll start with Ms. Canicula. How will the public and I don't think I understand. We're going to have this. Can you guys? Okay. Next question. How should the county support our senior citizens, and is there anything the county is doing now that could be done better? Ms. Canicula.
Well, 10,000 people a day are turning 65 in this country. And by the year 2070, there will be more people over the age of 50 than there will be under the age of 15. What does that mean for Kane County? Currently, just over 12% of the population is over 65. In about 20 years, that will more than double. So what I would say is, what is the plan? Currently, Kane County does not have any of its own senior services. Kane County does contract out to senior service associates, and they do a very fine job. But are we planning ahead? Because those seniors are coming and they're going to need resources. And most seniors want to stay in their homes and in their communities. They don't want to move to Florida to play golf. They want to be around their grandkids. They want to be here. What kind of plan do we have, and how is that going to affect our budget? Because if any population was going to explode more than 50%, we would be looking at it now.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Well, the county is doing a few things. In as far as property assessment goes, there's a $5,000 rebate, I guess, or exemption if you're 65 and over. And there's also a senior freeze, so property taxes can be frozen, keeping people in their homes longer. And there's also a homestead exemption. But one of the things that we have to and if the county can be proactive, here's an area we could be, and that is to engage our seniors more. To involve them more in what we're trying to accomplish as a county, and we can do that through volunteerism and boards and committees and that kind of thing. So more engagement, I believe, would be very helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Well, I'd like to make mention of one thing that I think the county is doing that makes us particularly unique among counties in Illinois, and that is that our Veterans Assistance Office which deals with veterans, but most of the veterans, or many of the veterans, are senior citizens, unique to this county, provides them actual assistance in obtaining their veterans benefits. In most counties, what they do is they will distribute stipends of rent assistance and what have you, but we have an extraordinary record in this county of providing assistance to veterans and utilizing the entirety of their benefit entitlement.
Thank you. Mr. Strom.
We've heard a couple things around both the services side and the budgetary side, and agree. I know my family is at our Centennial Farm, and my grandmother, before she passed away, used the homestead exemption and those types of things, which help fiscally. It's a matter of what can we do and how can we partner with private organizations like home care organizations if they want to stay in their home past being able to take care of themselves. Those types of things where we have to look. We don't necessarily have it in the budget to provide all those types of services, but how can we create awareness? How can we create a community of inclusion and involvement? And I know we provide a lot of social activities already, whether it's through the cities or through the county. So I think we just have to continue looking at it, like you said. It's going to. We have a shortage of medical professionals nationally, and that's going to be one of our biggest concerns here in the county, just like everywhere else.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
I think this could be a situation where the county and the towns within the county, the park districts, try to work together to come up with programs. I mean, obviously, Kane County is known for open spaces, and there's things out there, whether it's having your own gardening and trails to hike and walk. But I feel like there needs to be some kind of collaboration with the park districts and the towns, because this is not something that the Kane County can fund 100%, but it could definitely help out.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Lewis, how do you feel that the county board has dealt with the population growth in Kane County, and how will they deal with it in the future?
We have a pretty strong 2040 plan now, and so we've reached out and looked beyond the current time, and we've defined the county into three areas. Our urban, our development area, which is just immediately to the west, and then our agricultural area. And we've taken advantage of a number of national programs in that to manage our growth. We're constantly being pressured to initiate PUDs, planned unit developments, where we bring people in and spot them. But our 2040 plan, and following, the directions that we've come to agree upon as a board, has helped us deal with our growth.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
I agree with Mr. Lewis relative to the 2040 plan and what we're doing in that regard. It does have to be noted that most of the growth within the county involves municipalities, because the developers that are coming in require utilities and services that the county simply doesn't provide. So we have some control over that, but to a great degree, a lot of the people coming in are, in fact, not talking with the county when they come in. They're talking with Aurora and Geneva and St. Charles and other municipalities as they come in. But we are making a reasonable effort at holding our ground here and making certain we maintain the character of the county as it develops.
Thank you. Mr. Strom.
Mr. Martin's comments are music to my ears. I mean, if you think about where I live, I'm in unincorporated Kane County. I was in the heart of right next to where the Campton Hills was formed because of the encroachment of Elgin and the original intent of that was. So that's something dear to my heart. We've been here. We're in agriculture. We're one of the few family farms east of 47, just east of 47. But that's something that, I wake up and go to sleep thinking about, what is it going to look like in 2040. Obviously, the first time we created these plans, back when we had a lot of growth in the late 90s, 2000, up through the market crash in 08. We had way too many undeveloped lots and units, and a lot of that was in the municipalities, but we got out over our skis. So we've had a major correction in the last decade, and we just have to be very measured in what our response to that is going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, so there's always going to be a conflict of what people hope to achieve with this argument due to the fact that the cities and towns, they encourage the development, they want the growth, and then on the Kane County side, we're trying to achieve, open land and protecting our forest preserves. So this is going to be a constant back and forth battle.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula.
I actually like the 2040 plan. I particularly like it's called the Healthy Children's program. And I really like the goal to, by 2040, to have 50% of the Kane County land be agricultural open. I think that's a wonderful goal. I would like to see a little more detail in how we're going to care for our seniors. Can't help it. That's my issue. But I actually think the plan is a good one.
Thank you. Next question, starting with Mr. Martin. How will the public enter the new Settlers Hill cross-country facility, and will it be ADA compliant?
There will be, there are 3 entry points to the Settlers Hill facility. The regular Forest Preserve activity will be from a parking lot that will be directly behind the soccer facility on Kirk Road. On days when there are events, parking will be in the Cougar parking lot, and there will be pathways from the Cougar parking lot up to the crest. And there's an auxiliary parking lot that will be on the west edge of the facility that will be utilized when there are events for ambulance traffic, vendor traffic, and for taking people who are otherwise in need of assistance to the viewing area at the top of the hill. And there will be places at the top of the hill to drop off people who need assistance at that time.
Thank you. Mr. Martin. Mr. Strom, sorry.
Well, I think that question was a plant for Mr. Martin, since he's been on the forefront of that issue. And I'm not sure what else I could add in detail.
We'll stop. We'll rip it up. Okay. So, we'll start with you then.
Fair enough.
Go. And the question to you will be, what plans do you have to preserve the farmland in the west end of Kane County and protect it against sprawl development? How appropriate is that?
Well, that sounds like a plan for me.
Farmer, the first question. We think that's a plan.
This is working out well. No, I know it's not a plant. Well, in 16 there was a big referendum passed for the Forest Preserve to refill their coffers. So I know they have aggressive plans to continue to expand the Forest Preserve, which is great. I can tell you that I'm personally have ground in to the agricultural easement program. My family is the only family in the county that's put ag ground into the county ag easement program east of 47. That was done in 2002. And I currently have more ground in process of going through that. So I don't just preach it, I practice it personally, and my role in the county board is going to continue to figure out how we can take that third to the west and even some of the middle corridor of the county and keep it ag space, whether it's public or private.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, what plans do you have to preserve farmland?
To preserve farmland,
on the west end of Kane County.
I would say that land acquisition is important. We just have to do it at a price that makes sense for the county to keep developers from trying to develop it. I'm definitely a fan of open spaces, and we just have to acquire the land though. It's got to be responsible.
Thank you, Ms. Canicula.
I think that the 2040 overall plan addresses a lot of this, and while I can't address this in particular, what I would say is how I would address it is I would turn to the experts like Mr. Strom, who is living it. So learning from the people who really know about those sections of the county is the way that I would approach it, just as I would ask Mr. Martin how to get into Settlers Hill.
Okay, I am going to remind people that the questions need to be able to be asked of everyone so that we don't have a slam dunk. And it's hard because you want to know how people are going to respond to issues that have already been partially or thoroughly dealt with. So I understand that. So I apologize for the last question, but here we go. Mr. Lewis.
Are you asking me a question, or you want me to answer the last one? Or-
What plans do you have to preserve the farmland in the west side of Kane County?
Okay, so same question. Well, the county does have a farmland preservation program whereby the federal government matches the county's money, and we basically buy a farmland easement, and the land is dedicated for perpetuity for agriculture. So we're pretty proud of that program. We're one of the very few counties in the country that has that. Secondly, when you're a member of the county board, you also serve in the Kane County Forest Preserve. And open space referendums are very popular in this county. Our citizens are very responsive. We have 70 to 80% approval of that. Since I've been on the board, we've increased open space to nearly 23,000 acres. So I'm with you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, you get to answer this one too. But thank you very much for your response on Settlers Hill. It was very informative.
Well, I'm just trying to hold my microphone up. The 2040 plan is in place. To Phil's point relative to the referendum, the Forest Preserve has done a magnificent job of cooperating with the Conservation Foundation and other entities to do the best job possible of acquiring ground within the county and maintaining it as open space. So in addition to our easement program, the referendum and the support that it receives from the taxpayers and voters is what I would recommend and what I fully endorse.
Thank you. Okay, now we will start with Mr. Weber. And what changes do you see coming in Kane County in terms of transportation and highway construction and the lack of state funding? Got a magic wand?
The lack of state funding is going to be the bane of our existence over here in Kane County. As you know, the state is severely mismanaged. Obviously, there's not a state rep here right now, but it's severely mismanaged. So we're constantly going to be fighting for funds to help keep everything, in tip-top shape as far as maintenance goes. So as we build or decide to make repairs, we need to do it in a very mindful manner and do it within our budget constraints.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula.
Well, I think this issue needs to be looked at working together with the different municipalities. As Mr. Martin said, that's where the most growth has been in the county. So working in partnership is going to have to be looked at in order to fund our transportation issues. And our transportation issues, again, are going to include ways for people with disabilities and seniors to get around, because as they age, they're going to need ways to get to the grocery store. So again, I would like to see that as part of the plan, and hopefully the towns can work together.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you. Well, transportation is one of those things that just is a continuous issue in any urban area like we are in. Public transportation needs to be approached in a fashion where it can meet the needs of more people. Right now, public transportation is pretty, it's not used very much here in Kane County because it doesn't really serve the population. And I'm a professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and transportation is constantly front and center for us. And so we're looking out to 50 years, and we're thinking of, trying to figure ways where we can move people more efficiently in areas like Kane County.
Mr. Martin.
Well, it's a very challenging issue because most of the roads that we build in this county, we build and construct with matching funds from the state of Illinois and the federal government. The state of Illinois is in the condition we all know it to be. And if I understand correctly, the proposals that are being talked about on a federal basis, the infrastructure plans that are likely to go in place will require state matching funds. So this is going to be a difficult task, and maintaining our roads is going to be a daunting task in the immediate future.
Thank you. Mr. Strom.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add here is that those difficult decisions are going to have to be made in concert with the Department of Transportation and to weigh the pros and cons to each of the projects. You know, we're getting ahead on some things with the bridge and the roundabout next to my house, a mile down the road from my house, which was actually I thought was a really great idea until they put 50 lights, 40-foot lights on there, and now it looks like a football field down the road all night, every night. But so all these projects are going to be gone through, and we have, you know, if we don't have the budget for it, then we're going to have to pick and choose winners, and it's going to be something we're going to have to deal with. And hopefully, whether it's the federal, whatever the federal mandate ends up being, and the state ability to provide us funds, we're going to have to deal with it. So I don't think we need to aggressively change our tax levies here locally to adjust to our needs of transportation. We're going to have to deal within a budget. We have to have fiscal responsibility when it comes to this.
Thank you. Last question. Starting with Ms. Canicula. How do you feel about health care for the board members, and would you agree to do away with it? And how about the IMRF benefits for board members?
Well, let's start with the pension. In 2017, the state of Illinois passed a law that new board members don't receive a pension. So this issue would be only directed at board members who are sitting now. What I would say is I would not agree to take away those benefits from the board members that are already sitting, because that's what was promised them, and I think it's just a bad government. I think that the board has shown that they are fiscally responsible and that they can manage the pensions for the folks who have them. As far as the health care, I think that it's not a black and white issue. I think that for some people who want to get involved in the board, it would make it more possible if they could get health insurance through the board, but I don't think it's necessary, absolutely. I think it's a nice way to help folks who want to become board members who may have to give up part of their job so they can't get it through their job. But otherwise, I guess I could go either way on it.
Mr. Lewis.
Well, when I joined the board 11 years ago, medical insurance was offered to me, and I took it. And being a part of the IMRF, that was offered to me, and I took that also. And as most board members did. It's one of those benefits that because we're part of a larger organization, there's 1,300 employees in Kane County government. And so if you had one or two board members, we're not going to change the cost of health care very much, the cost of the medical. But I think there's, it's one of those things where it's a benefit that's available to a board member. And, but if we decide we're going to eliminate it, we'll eliminate it.
Mr. Martin.
I don't believe that we should be collecting it, and I don't. When I ran, I announced, and I kept that promise, that I'm not in the county's insurance program. I'm not on IMRF. I believe we're part-time employees, and part-time employees in most of the world do not get benefits, and so I collect none.
Mr. Strom.
Yeah, you stole my answer. Part-time, I don't believe necessitates health care coverage. It's easy for me to say. I get coverage from my day job, but I don't think when we talk about 1,300 employees, most of those are full-time, and they are the ones that deserve it. And I know it's not going to change the health policy premiums and such, but it's still a heavy cost per head on the board. So I'm for foregoing it.
Mr. Weber.
I am not a fan of the pension or the health care. I work in private enterprise. I personally pay for half of my health care every month, and that's for a full-time job. You know, there is a cost associated with it, whether it's the pension and the insurance. I'm going to throw out a number. I think the average cost for a board member between the IMRF fund as well as the insurance, it's about $17,000, $18,000. That's real money. If you took that by 24 districts, that could be money that could be used to possibly, you know, be seed money to fund a mental health program or to put towards a senior citizen program. So I'm not a fan of either.
Thank you. And now we'll go to closing, and we will start with Mr. Lewis. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Again, appreciate the opportunity to present my thinking to this group, and appreciate the invite from the Women's League of Voters. My background is in engineering. I was trained as an engineer, a graduate of Milwaukee School of Engineering. And because of that training, I look at things in a very articulate way. Our budget, I brought a copy of it here. It's a pretty thick book. And there's a lot of things that go on in Kane County. And we're presented with a whole variety of issues. And you need to bring some background to the position so that you can have a clear understanding of how to deal with those issues and prioritize them. And I believe that I've been able to do that. My commitment to the community is wholehearted. I mean, my family is here, my grandkids are here. The quality of life of my community is extremely important. I think about it. I do my very best to try to improve the quality of life here. And in the future, this next term, we'll have a 2020 census that's going to happen, and the county board will be reapportioning the board seats. And I'm in favor of reducing the number of board seats. In fact, state legislature, if we hit 550,000, we're at 535,000 right now, but if we hit 550,000 by 2020, we'll be reducing the board seats to 18. And I want to represent St. Charles and Geneva in that discussion. I want to make sure that my community is well represented on the Kane County Board, and I think my experience and my background of lengthy, you know, as a senior member of the board will prove very vital and important in that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Martin.
Well, I very much appreciate the opportunity that the voters gave me to serve in the capacity I have for the last 3 years. I earnestly hope that I have that opportunity given me again. I carried into office 40 years experience, as I indicated, as an attorney, and I now am seeking re-election based upon 4 years of what I consider to be my effort and the knowledge that I've acquired serving on the board since I was elected. It's a good thing to be able to serve your community, and I would hope for that opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Strom.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you again for having us tonight. The reason I'm running, and I'm a first time, this is my first campaign, and quite honestly, I have one primary opponent and two on the other side. So there's actually 4 of us running, which I think is the most that's run for this district in I don't even know how long, which is great. But it means that civic involvement and civic interest is probably at an all-time high. And I believe I'm the best positioned, not only because of my experience, my energy, my background, my ability to run through budgets, run through financial models and plans and adjust and make hard decisions. And I'm also the only one here that showed up tonight, which doesn't hurt, at least for the immediate audience. But I'm going to be at every meeting, and I'm going to be a strong voice and a strong leader for my district and for the county as a whole. And I look forward to serving this county, the county that I grew up and I grew up in, my family's grown up in, and my kids will grow up in.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
Yes. As stated, I am not a career politician. This would be my first forte into political office. However, personally, I do sit on a board of a privately run charity. We feed 3,000 families a year, so I'm definitely engaged within the community in helping people. Professionally, I sit on advisory boards within my industry, so I'm very well versed when it comes to budgets and getting programs done and follow through. Like I said, I would be a young politician possibly replacing a politician that's been in office for 12 years. So I think it's important to get some youth into the office, to get younger people engaged. I support term limits. I want to continue to support the tax freeze. And I just want to be heavily involved in my district. I've talked to a lot of community leaders, business owners, constituents to see what their needs are or concerns that they have. I want to be very approachable, very available, and I just want to be a good representation of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Canicula?
I am hoping that I can bring some new eyes and some new ideas to the board. There are many people that are on the board that have very impressive records with business, and that's very important. I would be bringing something totally different. I would be bringing the concerns and the needed resources of everyday people. That's what I do in my job every day. I see what people need on the ground, and I'm hoping that I can be that new voice on the board. I do have experience with budgets before. I have been in an elected position in a professional group, so I have that as well. But I also want to thank everyone for coming. I think it's wonderful that everybody is involved, and thanks to everyone on the panel, too. It was fun.
Well, thank you. And I would like to thank all of you for coming. And as it has been pointed out, there are several nameplates without people behind them. We are nonpartisan as the League of Women Voters, but I think it's important for you to see that there are people that did not show up. And that may be something that sways you one way or the other. We have, as the League, have invited them so that they have an opportunity to answer your questions. So, with no further ado, let's give these guys a round of applause. Thank you very much. We'll take about a 5-minute break, and I will have the candidates for county clerk, if you would come up front, please.
Okay. Dan, you on the campaign trail? Enjoyed it.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll see you around the campaign trail.
Absolutely. Nice seeing you. Yes. We'll see you there.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, as a farmland protection.
Okay.
I own that.
Yeah, then I want to. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice I'm going to talk to you. While you're waiting. Yeah. My questions are yeah, and I wanted all of them. I want to know how. Oh, and then this guy says,
And I've never met you. I've been my grandson's
Not terrible to do that with someone's grandchildren. I understand that.
So,
county clerk.
Oh, yeah. I'm 13. Yeah. Is he? Good friend of mine.
But anyway, so I got to do it. So I kind of got to cut back to do it,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. Thank you. Good. Time to get all them one
Nashville refrigerator.
I live in Batavia, and well, due to our wonderful governor, my program was closed. I work with families with seniors in their home through Metropolitan Family Services, and the funding, right? Oh, keep it separate. So the funding was cut. I lost my job. My clients all lost their services, and because they closed the program. So that's what I'm trying to do. But thank you. That means so much to me, Vanessa. Well, I didn't. Okay, I'm going to be around. Well, thank you. So I talked to John Martin for real, and I live in Virginia. So I have to take St. Charles. Hi, I'm Maureen Lewis. I'm from Thank you. I love his ideas. And when I go to the
You will be surprised how fast 2 minutes goes.
got a real nice brain.
Oh, I know. It's getting in front of people and then trying to say your part.
Yeah.
What you want to say quickly has to become this.
Yep.
Right?
Shorthand would be good.
Yeah.
You're a resident of Griffith Grove?
Elbert.
Elbert, okay. Well, I live just down 47 from you in Montgomery.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
That's probably the most southern part of the county.
Absolute southwest corner.
Yeah, wow.
Well, Big Rock, technically.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's good.
Oh, wait, what?
Hope we didn't break your camera. I was indeed, yes. Yes. Just me. Just me. So I got all the questions.
I lost my job.
This is a good group. Elgin didn't have this many people. Okay. Excellent. Good. It is indeed. Where do you live?
Yeah.
Terrific. You're willing to travel though to learn.
But to have your knowledge. You guys can take your seats, please.
Sure are. Well, I'm a trustee in Montgomery. We have a very good rapport with Oswego. We've been doing some cost-sharing things that are kind of novel and very helpful. We buy a piece of equipment and share it, vice versa. So we should do more of that.
If everyone could take their seats, please.
It's been we have a couple of pace routes, but they're, as Phil mentioned, they are marginally useful. Yes. We do contribute to that. Apparently not enough, but we did vote again to contribute to it.
It was the talk in person at the train station.
Yeah.
But then it's such a complicated process.
Oh my gosh.
If you could take your seats, please, we're about to get started.
Pleasure to meet you.
Okay. We are about to start with the candidates for county clerk. And as you can see, there are 3 nameplates and 2 people. So one of our individuals is not present. Everyone got a letter sent to their home address. The address that was listed on their petitions that they turned into the county. We either hear from people or we don't. So you can see who's here. So we will start with Mr. Bond. You have 2 minutes for an opening.
Thank you very much. My name is Stan Bond. I'm a candidate for Kane County Clerk. It's a great honor to be here with you. I wouldn't miss it. It's a chance to meet you and hear your questions and your comments. So it's important that we all be here. My wife, Marion Bond, is with us tonight. We're about to celebrate our 39th anniversary, hopefully on the heels of a primary win. We have been residents of Kane County for 28 years. We currently live in Montgomery, and we have 3 daughters and 3 grandsons. Just a bit about my business background. I have 42 years of business administration and technology experience. Marion and I have run a technology company for 34 years, which in itself is an accomplishment. The technology companies tend to have a much shorter lifespan. I also have some experience as an elected official. I'm a village trustee in Montgomery, Illinois, in my 2nd term. And prior to moving to Montgomery, we lived in Batavia, and I was a trustee for the Batavia Library District here. I currently work with the Kane County Information Technologies Department, and I have passed and received certification at level 4 for network and computer information system security. So that experience pretty directly relates to the county clerk's office as well. All of the county departments have become very technologically equipped and enabled, and that creates a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and I will probably get some questions about that, and I welcome them. My expertise in technology in particular is finding ways to bring people and technology together to common purpose. Technology on its own is not as powerful, and people on their own are not as powerful, but when you combine functional technology with good people, you get great results and much better efficiency.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez?
Thank you. So we started tonight's event by honoring the women in the room because of International Women's Day. So I want to tell a very quick story about a woman named Irma Jimenez. When she was 29 years old, she left her home country of Guatemala, left her family, her friends, her language, her culture, in pursuit of a dream, which is the American dream. A dream to provide a better life for her children. But a dream that is not handed to anybody, but is earned. And for decades, she fought and sacrificed to make that dream a reality, often holding multiple and unglamorous jobs. Often she would come home and tell her son after cleaning houses and hospital beds, "Mijo, un día tendrás una casa y una vida como la gente para la que trabajo." Which is, son, one day you will have a house and you will have a life like the people I work for. Eventually, she graduated from cleaning houses and started working for the Illinois Department of Child and Family Services, where she helped rescue children from neglect and abuse. And I recall a story about a particular investigation she conducted in the city, about a child who had been badly burned. And when she arrived at the house, she had discovered that the child had not just been burned on accident, but had been purposefully dipped into a pot of boiling water. Needless to say, she rescued that child from that house and that life of abuse, because anything less would be totally unthinkable. Now, this woman is my grandmother, and I am so honored to have her here with me tonight, because without her tireless work ethic and her endless sacrifice, I would not have the opportunity to introduce myself here tonight. My name is Nico Jimenez, and I'm the Democratic candidate for Kane County Clerk. Like I said, today is International Women's Day, a day to celebrate women. And I'm here to celebrate my grandmother and all women, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll start with you, Mr. Jimenez. And I will ask you what you feel are the most important issues facing the Kane County Clerk.
One of the most important things as the election official is getting people involved and bringing people into the political process, working to make sure that people have every opportunity to vote. Election day is not a national holiday. We have to work through jobs, commitments, often children and their commitments, and so sometimes it can be very difficult. And so catering to that and making sure we have programs in place so that people understand how to vote, when to vote, and who they can even vote for is extraordinarily important. And as one of the issues when it comes to voting is just making sure that the clerk and all their services is provided to all citizens of the county.
Thank you. Mr. Bond.
The clerk's office has been under the same leadership now for 16 years, the fellow who's not here tonight to speak with us. And I think any office that's been run by one person for that long deserves a very close examination of both its vendors and its processes and its staffing. So that would be the first challenge I would willingly accept. We also have some issues that have been neglected. For example, there are 117 precincts in Kane County that are unlawfully large, and that's happened because of the growth patterns in our county and the failure to readjust and realign the clerk's office to address that. We have 9 that are unlawfully small. We're using election equipment that's 12 years old, typically, and some of it's still running Windows 2000. It was created to the standards, the security standards of 2002. The current standards are 2015. We've got to take a look at how do we get from where we are to the future of voting in Kane County. The equipment we use now is not even made anymore.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez. What are the most important issues facing the county clerk's office?
The most important issue, like I said, is facing election integrity, issues of making sure that people have all the opportunities to vote and there is no voter suppression in the county. That there are services are provided to citizens throughout the entire county, as well as facing threats, I'm sure Mr. Bond will talk about, in cybersecurity, making sure that we feel safe when we go to vote. That's what I've got right now.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with you with question number 2. What should the county do to help a wider variety of people register and vote? For example, the homeless, incarcerated, and people who are not mobile.
That's an interesting question. I know that Illinois is going to be doing a automatic voter registration for people who attend DMVs and things of that nature. For people who are otherwise unable, setting up different programs, whether it's for the elderly, reaching out to them if they are incapable of traveling, as you said, reaching out to them in any capacity that's possible. I think that that's what I have right now in terms of.
Okay, Mr. Bond.
There are some very effective programs in place now, but they're not well promoted, and I would look to correct that issue. We have, for example, a ballot by mail program. It used to be called absentee voting, but it's different now. You don't need an excuse to vote by mail. You can simply ask for a ballot to be mailed to you. And that's a great convenience to people that have mobility issues or just prefer the comfort and convenience of voting at their kitchen table. We have curbside voting, which is also not well known, but you can make arrangements to have a voting machine brought to your car or your van and vote at curbside with an election judge assisting you. We also, to address the issue of voting in general, only about half of the Kane County population is even registered to vote, and on a good day, only about half of that group will vote. We've got to reach young people and get them more familiar with and excited about the voting process. I would like to experiment with some programs in the high schools to let them have high school voting, not a ballot for us, elected officials, but an issue maybe related to their high school or to their high school experience, just so they can get familiar with how do ballots get created, how do people get to vote and use the equipment we have.
Thank you. Mr. Bond, how does the county clerk ensure that the public has a positive contact with this essential but confusing office?
I think the first start in today's world is a greatly improved website. The current website to me is an embarrassment, and I can't wait to improve it. But I think we could do more in terms of outreach and publicity, and we can certainly do more in the way of handouts that are provided at the office. I agree, the services that we offer are very important, but it isn't always very clear how to get to them or how to take advantage of them.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez.
I agree. The website for the Kane County Clerk's Office definitely needs to be much more approachable to the average citizen in Kane County. There needs to be very clear and concise ways to get the information that you need in a manner that suits everybody, from a younger generation to the older generation who might not be as familiar with using computers or technology. Utilizing things like social media, we were talking about earlier, getting younger people engaged in the political process and kind of understanding how to vote and when they can vote, and utilizing tools like that to reach out to them, to educate them, would be very beneficial for the clerk's office.
Thank you. Starting with you for question number 4, what do you propose doing to handle the issues of large precincts and long voting lines? Mr. Jimenez.
Some of the numbers that were already given, about 117 precincts are extraordinarily large. We have a precinct in Rutland Township that's nearly 5,000, or if not more, in one precinct, which is very large. When it comes to polling sizes, or precinct sizes, our goal should be to make sure that polling places are run efficiently and effectively and not cause any issues with waiting lines. In my view, we should conduct a statistical analysis utilizing historical trends of voter turnout to reevaluate where we are with the size of our polling places as well as our precincts.
Mr. Bond.
I've been traveling the county extensively, and I've spent a fair bit of time in Rutland Township where the growth has been rapid. At one time, my precinct in Sugar Grove was the largest in terms of registered voters in the county. I'm now number 3, and the largest precinct by far is the Del Webb Sun City development. A resident there about 2 weeks ago took me on a tour of their voting area and showed me how long the lines had been for voting. And I can tell you, she estimated there were maybe 300 people standing in line waiting to vote. I can tell you that from what she showed me, the line extended from where we're sitting to where the police window is. And that breaks my heart. In my own precinct, I've seen lines go out the door, around the sidewalk, toward the parking lot, and I've seen people standing in line just breaking out of line and going back to their car, thinking I'm not going to stand here that long. That truly breaks my heart. We have got to do better. We can do better. We can do it.
We can do it. Okay. Number 5, we'll start with Mr. Bond. How has early voting had an impact on voting patterns in Kane County?
Well, it's done several things. You see more political signs more early in the year. I have a particular concern about early voting, not the process itself. It's been very helpful toward reducing the voting lines. But there's an Election Day hotline number that all of you are welcome and encouraged to use. I will share it with the league so they can help distribute it as well. But it's only available on Election Day. We know now that 35% of our voting, and in some cases 50%, is early. And I just cannot fathom why this line isn't active during early voting. And it's one of the very first things I will work for is to rectify that. Early voting is very helpful, and I think ballot by mail, which is a form of early voting, could be promoted much more extensively and may become much more popular than it is now.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez.
Early voting is extraordinarily important. Like I mentioned earlier, Election Day is not a national holiday. We don't have the day off to spend time going to polling places and exercising our right to vote. So it's important that people have the opportunity to vote at their convenience early before the general election, before the primary election, whenever their election might be. And programs like that are very beneficial to the community. Like we were saying, vote by mail is also one of the programs that is extremely beneficial, and I support both of those.
Thank you. Next question to you first, Mr. Jimenez. Do you have concerns about IT issues in Kane County?
In Kane County in general, I believe that obviously having a very strong IT network and security is extraordinarily important. We've heard constant issues with previous elections and the question of their security. So having a very sound and solid information technology department within the county as a whole, especially in the clerk's office, is very, very important. And we need to strive to ensure that that is being done. And as clerk, that is one of the things that I will be focusing on first and foremost.
Thank you. Mr. Bond.
Although I have achieved the level 4 certification, as I mentioned, in computer system and network security, I would turn to a commission or a committee to continually evaluate the security procedures and processes of the King County Clerk's network and computing operation. That office not only maintains your very valuable and personal voting information and voting systems, but it also houses very valuable and important information about your families, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates, business formation. There are ways to breach data that are expanding rapidly. 2016, there were more breaches of data than ever before. 2017, that increased by more than 300%, and it looks like from 2018, we're going to have another record-breaking year. Even the backups of databases have been hacked. The Chicago Election Commission had not their server hacked, but the backup of their server hacked. There's much less attention paid to that, but you can see it's the same data, it's the same problem.
On that note, Mr. Bond, continue talking about protecting the safety of our voting records. It's going to be more costly. What plans for protection against hacking, identity theft, and election fraud do you have specifically?
If I describe them specifically, we'd have to kill everyone in the room because it's not helpful to. One of the primary rules in security is you don't talk about what you've got.
You could explain them to me and I still wouldn't get it.
The most important notions of security are they're internal and external. Employees can make innocent mistakes that expose and compromise data. So employee training is extremely important. And I don't believe there is a formal program in the clerk's office at the moment to do that. I intend to implement that. And then there are the external threats, both domestic and foreign. In my own experience, plugging in a brand new server, within 30 minutes I've seen people trying to hack it already. The hacking is intense and it's a problem that's not going to go away. But training and vigilance and sound planning are the best defense against it.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez.
I agree that training is going to be a vital portion of what needs to be done in the office. Much of what I do for a living consists of training employees. And when it comes to security, obviously we need to make sure that we have the proper defense and the proper knowledge behind it to ensure that our vital records, our election records, our voting booths are all safe and secure. But we cannot let the fear of cyber attacks stop us from moving forward in using technology. We should be able to use it to make sure that voting is easier and that we can modernize the clerk's office.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez, what skills do you possess to run a successful county clerk's office?
I'm a quality assurance specialist in the food industry. My job entails a lot of documentation. We have policies and procedures for every single thing that we do in our facility. And everything needs to be trained, we need to be documented, and a lot of that is very transferable to what the clerk does in regards to maintaining records, organizing and managing all voting places. So those types of skills can directly transfer to what the clerk is in need of in the office.
Thank you. Mr. Bond.
I was employed in the county clerk's office initially as a contract vendor to assist with technology. In 2011, in the spring and summer of 2011, in December of that year, I was hired as a full-time employee. In 21 months, I was promoted 3 times, eventually becoming chief deputy clerk. Prior to that, applications analyst. The office has about 36 regular full-time employees, and during the election season, that number explodes to more than 100. It's a combination of union and non-union personnel, and that in itself requires a special touch and a special attitude. You have people working in the same office who are and are not union, and they're under much different working rules. But I'm familiar with the office, I'm familiar with the equipment. Some of the systems that are there now I helped create, and I know the people very well. My business background and my technology background will certainly help, but loving that work and understanding how important it is to Kane County is where it starts.
Thank you. Starting with you, Mr. Bond. If elected, will this be your full-time job?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Jimenez, will this be your full-time job?
Yes.
Okay. Starting with you, Mr. Jimenez, last question. What is your view on term limits? Why or why not? And would you self-limit your term if elected?
I understand the reason that people like to have term limits. To get a new, fresh perspective in an office where people have been representing for a certain period of time, bringing in new ideas is always beneficial. However, I believe that if there's an individual who is doing a very good job, they're representing people, they are helping people, they're serving their communities, in a situation like that, I don't believe that a term limit would be beneficial, because you might take that person out and replace them with someone who wasn't doing as good a job as previous. So I could be split on the topic of term limits. Me personally, I always seek to continually improve myself. I am not someone who will pretend I'm a genius or perfect at something. I always think there is room to improve no matter how far you ascend in your knowledge. So I would be definitely doing the best of my ability for as long as I can and going from there.
Thank you. Mr. Bond.
Well, there are 2 kinds of term limits. There's voluntary term limits, and they're the kind that are imposed by incidents of life. The current county clerk does not have a successor who's trained and equipped to take the seat immediately, and that is my first priority with regard to term limits. It's very important to have a chain of command and someone who knows the operation of the office and its responsibilities well enough to functionally serve as number 2 and number 1 if they're ever needed. Secondly, I do not intend to serve more than 2 terms. I think my job is to create an office that can run itself and to create a successor that can run the office or make the systems good enough that anyone in the public could run for that office and serve. We're approaching springtime, and that's a moment when opening the windows for some fresh air and some sunlight is a very healthy thing. And I think in an office that's been run by the same person for 16 years, that very much applies in the case of the county clerk. So I look forward to spring cleaning.
Thank you. And now we'll go to your closing, and we'll start with Mr. Bond. You have 2 minutes.
The combination of business skills and business experience and technology that I offer, I think, is well suited to a successful county clerk's office and to serving you well. Over the years, I've developed an ability to work well with a wide variety of people and challenge them to do and be their best. I was in a technology company. I had no choice, if I were to be successful, but to attract, train, and keep highly talented people, and I know how to do that, and I think the same situation exists in the county clerk's office. I'm comfortable with technology, and my greatest interest in the use of technology is helping people adopt it and adapt it to fit their job situation and their job needs. There are many ways that technology can make people's lives and their jobs easier and more productive and less stressful. And that's exactly what needs to happen both inside the county clerk's office, but I want visiting the website of the county clerk to be less stressful for people as well. After 16 years, I think it's time for a new era in that office and a new attitude and a new set of skills. I offer some new ways to serve you better. I plan to offer a staff that will serve you better and a system that will serve that office well into the future. My name is Stan Bond, and I would appreciate your vote to make me the new Kane County Clerk.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez.
I mentioned earlier that I work as a quality assurance specialist for a cheese company. We provide cheese to every state in the country, every state in this country. We import from all over the world, domestically as well. My responsibility is to ensure that the products that we produce are safe for consumption of everyone in this country. And with that, and with all the documentation and the hard work and the training that goes into it, you need somebody dependable so that you feel safe when you consume the products that we produce. I'm a born and raised native of Kane County, and I care very deeply about my community, which is why I'm running for Kane County Clerk. I believe that I have the drive, the passion, and the commitment to bring new ideas and to serve my community. I believe that by bringing people into the political process will help foster a healthy and vibrant democracy, and that is very important for the office of the Kane County Clerk. And like I mentioned earlier, I come from a family of very strong women, and I'm very proud of that. And I hope you understand a little bit of where I come from and who I am, and I look forward to bringing new ideas and working hard as the next Kane County Clerk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would thank the two candidates who have come out tonight to address your questions. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, we will take 5 minutes, and we will start with the sheriff's candidates.
My number is 630-659-5639.
Okay, we'll get you guys up here. I just need to make sure it's in. I appreciate you coming.
I can ask the questions more than anything else. No matter where I go, whether it's the dentist's office or anywhere, they always ask, where's your cheese bread? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, okay.
You gonna make sure they pay the
to make sure they're paying the camera that is in the car.
When you're alphabetical, we're not doing your
That works.
We serve coffee at this hour.
Yeah.
You disappointed by that? It doesn't really point out.
Tell me I want to get your pictures if you don't mind.
Sure.
I gotta say, in a good way, you all look like law enforcement.
Can we get one by the flag?
Complimentary, guys.
That's my good side.
Look, autographs afterwards. My signature is authentic too.
I got baseballs.
It's the last one, man. Now, I know you've done this before. You figure you get down to the last couple weeks, it is what it is. You just want to slide. Definitely not for the faint at heart.
I think you guys at work are more tense than us.
The guys at work.
You guys at work.
Just because they don't know what's going to happen. Well, they should be, because from one thing they should know is that it's going to be better than it is. Yeah.
Avery's birthday's on the 20th. They're having a little pizza party for me, thanks.
Wait, whose birthday?
My son's. We gotta take him and get his license. He passed 60.
I thought he was younger. Is he out of here?
No, he's not in Sandwich.
I guess I just didn't think he was. We were just going to court and
He likes driving the truck. Thinking ahead way back in 2000. So he's got that. He likes driving it's a smaller car. It's a big truck with small parts. He goes, parts back it in. So then for a while he's like, we'll get back in it. Gotta ask him, yes, back it in. So now he'll just be like, don't say nothing. I got it.
Is this a fireman thing?
Yeah. Just teach him to back use it.
Use the mirrors?
I got the back. The first time he does it, he puts it in reverse. My head right over.
Okay, they got to be reviewed.
I go, that's what they're for. He does it. Now he drives the car.
Really? Okay, if everyone could take their seats.
Just gotta find something to stick.
You know, this is fine. Okay, because we moved it for the cameras. For the cameras. Because he wouldn't let me.
Yep. He got rid of one of our fire engines.
Okay, we're about to get started.
that for us.
Huh? And we're done. 12. Yeah. Sounds good. Right.
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Okay, if you could take your seats, please. We're about to start our third section of this candidates forum. This is our last this spring, just so you know. Yay! We did 7 last spring. It was kind of confusing because we cover territory from Aurora, Montgomery, all the way north to South Elgin, and we go west to Campton Hills, Elburn, Maple Park, as long as it's on this side of the county line, Sugar Grove. So we thank you for coming tonight. And so we will start with the opening, and as you can see, 3 of the 4 candidates are present, and I scrunched them together. Didn't make them sit with somebody in a blank person in the middle. So we'll start with Mr. Hain. Your opening statement, please.
Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters and everybody for coming out tonight, as well as the other candidates. You guys are actually seeing our third forum in a week, so we've had 2 dress rehearsals for this show. So this should be pretty good. Yeah, this should be the most entertaining one, I figure. But the real issue is Kane County faces some very serious problems when it comes to public safety. We have a rampant opioid epidemic that is constantly in the newspaper. We have a rising violent crime rate since 2014, and we have a high reoffending rate in and out of our Kane County Jail. Your sheriff can have a dramatic impact on these and many other issues. This is a very important race. Our office alone has a $28 million budget, which is the largest chunk of tax appropriated budget of any Kane County division. We have a very large responsibility, and you, the taxpayers, should know exactly what we're doing with it, because throwing money at the same problem does not work. It's time for innovative and progressive ideas. So I look forward to sharing with you many of my thoughts and ideas tonight, and also referring you to some other resources to get a grasp of our progressive concepts for bettering Kane County's public safety in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hain. Mr. Mays.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the citizens for taking time out of your schedule to come out and hear us, knowing that that is time you will not get back. To the candidates, it's a privilege sitting up here with them as well. My name is Willie Mays. I'm a 30-plus year law enforcement, 30-plus years of law enforcement experience, veteran. And 6 of those years I spent at the Illinois Department of Corrections. And when I left there, I then came over to the Kane County Sheriff's Office, where I worked 2 years in the correction facility there before transferring out to the public safety side. And so I have 8 years of correction experience, which I'm the only candidate on the ballot that has that substantial correction experience. And yes, I do believe it will aid me in running the county jail. When I moved over to the public safety side, I worked in the street as a deputy, eventually moved into investigations, where I became an evidence technician, and I was tasked with pioneering our first crime scene unit. Years after that, that same unit became the bomb arson and evidence unit. My time in that unit allowed me to also be placed on the SWAT team, as well as become a certified bomb technician, and eventually leading to my first promotion as a sergeant. And I then ran that area and was bomb squad commander for 14 years. I currently serve as a lieutenant on the midnight shift in the patrol division. And leadership is important, because that is what's going to guide us down the path of the future. And so it's very important to make sure that we have someone who understands what leadership is, and not only understand it, but who's willing to model it, so that the employees who work for them will be willing to act in the same manner. So I look forward to sharing the ideas with you and answering your questions, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters, everybody coming here. And again, it is an honor to sit up here with these 2 gentlemen that I've worked many, many years with. I'm Kevin Tyndall. I work at the King County Sheriff's Office. I've been there for over 27 years. In that time that I've been able to work in every area that we have at the Sheriff's Office, from patrols, where everybody starts, through investigations, doing major crimes, working in the civil enforcement area that we have with it, planning and training,
and then back in patrol currently as a sergeant. In that time, I've been able to serve on specialty units also, started on SWAT. The reason that they actually put me on SWAT was because of my EMS experience that I started with. So back in 1986, I actually got into EMS first. Then in 88, I started on the fire department. Then in 90, I got hired at the sheriff's office. And for 22 years, I did all of it consecutively. A lot of time management, but it was easy because everything's interrelated and can be combined, and the resources that we have with it make it so much easier. So being on the SWAT as the EMS or the medical personnel that we started with, and then progressing my way up to being in charge of SWAT, and then spending 17 years when I stepped off SWAT, I was the commander of it. While I was there, we started the Kane County Fire Investigation Task Force, which is a combination group between law enforcement and the fire departments to investigate fires, because we know that the large dollar loss you have in house fires or residential fires is catastrophic. I mean, you're going to run into a lot of high insurances, which we all seen, so we needed to be able to investigate those. So building that task force together, bringing the communities, the fire departments and law enforcement in together in a partnership and working with the state's attorney's office, we were able to do that. And we were able to work with the legislature to actually have the offenders reimburse for the investigation. So now it's a self-sustaining group that we have with it. From the fire department, I retired as an assistant chief. I also did 2 years as an elected official. So in my background with the law enforcement, fire service on management side, on the EMS side of it, putting them together, building the budgets and working with the budgets, doing the tax appropriations, tax levies. I understand where the county board members come from and feel that what makes me qualified to be the sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 1, and we'll start with Mr. Mays. What changes, if any, would you like to see implemented in the operations of the county jail, and why would you want those changes? And what change would you make in the first 30 days?
Okay, well, I think there are
many parts of the question.
Well, first, let me say that the county jail would be my priority because I believe that that's where we have some issues that are that should be dealt with first. And in doing so, I think that I would first conduct a job audit, job interviews, in order to see exactly what the officers are required to do and what it is that they're doing, and get feedback from them as to what they think will help them do their jobs, and to ensure that we first have a safe working environment, to make sure that we have enough officers, and if we don't, then take and make sure we educate the county board on the fact why we don't have enough officers, and then take and try to get enough officers in order to make it a safe working environment. And I know there was 2 other questions in there that I haven't hit yet.
What changes would you make in the first 30 days?
Okay. In the first 30 days, I would make no changes. I would do none but assess the office so I could understand the current work environment there at the office.
Okay. Mr. Tyndall.
In the first 30 days, again, as Mr. Mays mentioned, you have to take into account everything that's going on in the totality of it. If there's an emergency need, then we definitely would address it. But other than that, there's things that we can do to work through processes and the procedures and the policies, working with the individuals in those specific areas that they have. And it's a matter of interviewing all the employees that you have, doing your job audits, making sure what process can we make more efficient, and where's our safety concerns. It's been touted numerous times that there's safety concerns in the jail, even back in 2014 when we lost the federal marshal program, the safety concerns. We got rid of the marshals, we lost $2.5 million, and we brought our prisoners back in, so we still had the safety concerns. So we need to work with those corrections officers who are our professionals on what we need to do to establish a better, safer jail that we have in there, and we also need to make sure everybody is trained appropriately as opposed to being just set into separate areas, and we only have the 99 corrections officers versus the administrative staff that cannot fill some of those spots if we need them to.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
I certainly agree with the other 2 candidates that is our number 1 and largest responsibility at the sheriff's office is the jail, both by budget and by liability and life responsibility. So one of the first issues we have to attack is morale of our personnel in the jail. We're supposed to have 122 corrections officers staffed in that facility. Currently, we struggle to maintain 100. We have to look at their employment contract. which from years 2 to 7 basically does not give them a pay raise. So we're looking at folks between 25 and 30 years old trying to start a life, family, buy cars, buy a house, have kids, who are stuck in a mid-50,000s annual salary. So they're leaving us and they're going to other places, and our long-term employees are getting stuck working overtime. So it's a very miserable environment for our current staff at the jail. So that would be one of my first initiatives, is to make an addendum to their current contract. Of course, it is up right now for contracts.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Tyndall, does the sheriff have sufficient budget for training of officers and fighting the opioid crisis in Kane County?
The amount of money that the sheriff has, I feel, is currently adequate. The problem that we run into is the allocation of our resources and our assets. It stated numerous times that our personnel are our biggest asset. We have guys there with so many years of experience, so much education, that we are underutilizing them in their certain areas of expertise. Dealing with the opioid issue, can you ever throw enough money into it? It's going to be difficult, because the problem is people that want to get on drugs, they're going to get on drugs. Our biggest thing that we need to start with that assets and reallocations of our resources is to make sure that we keep the school resource officers in the school, that we strengthen up our programs that we have with our take-back drugs to keep them out of the prescription drugs, out of the hands of the kids. We need to make sure that we try and prevent the kids from becoming addicted to it, because that's where you stop it. You don't become addicted if you never start into it. And if we can work on those programs and identify those kids and initially in the schools, then we'll do well.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
Currently at the Sheriff's Office, we're using antiquated investigative tactics to detect the flow of heroin in and around Kane County. One of the first concepts that I put out there on my Sheriff's campaign website was the heroin hotline that will open up a network for people, the community, to communicate with us anonymous information about heroin activity. With that, I wish to establish a task force of local municipalities to work alongside of our deputies to respond to this information and concerns. And third, and quite possibly the most important tier, is treating our addicted population. We can no longer allow these people to come into our Kane County Jail and return right back out on the street with no diversion and with no treatment, because they'll simply reoffend. So I also launched a concept for a cutting-edge heroin rehabilitator program that is also on my website.
Thank you. Mr. Mays.
Could I have the question again, please?
Does the sheriff have sufficient budget for training of officers and fighting the, you just wanted to hear me say that again, opioid crisis in Kane County?
I agree with partially with what both of the other candidates have said. I believe the resources are there. I just think that we need to make sure that we're being effective and efficient in allocating those resources, and that the training that we make sure that we give, that the training is current and current on trends that are happening now. We definitely live in a different time than we did before, and so the things that we're going to do to try to deal with it has got to be different than what we've done in the past. And so for the opiates, see, I messed it up too.
Drink some water, it helped me.
It's important to start with prevention, prevention, awareness, and then we have to have services. So I think on the prevention side of things, we have to get out in front of it and have to make sure that people who are in contact with individuals who are doing drugs, that they are talked to and explained exactly what happens when they go down that path. We need to make sure that if we can keep them off of drugs, that we do. The program Too Good for Drugs is still something that we can utilize, but we also need to make sure we're doing other things to be more preventive. And even by sitting down and finding out how we can come to task with all the doctors, and so that way we can talk to them about even the prescribing of the opiates.
Thank you. Mr. Hain, please comment on the Treatment Alternative Court and its effectiveness.
So there are several courts that are currently operating that are diversion programs. There's the drug court, there's Veterans Court that's coming up, task court, and they all serve different facets of our community. all of them are very essential for minimizing jail population and diverting people to a more productive path in life.
Thank you. Mr. Mays.
The three that Mr. Haynes just mentioned are definitely there and are worth their weight as we see the different people graduate from the drug court. And the thing I think that all three of these have in common is that these individuals who are in these courts are all living a lifestyle that is probably below the medium and are having hard times making ends meet. And so I think that's one common factor in it all. So I think if we can take and we can put them in these programs, and if while they're in these programs, if we can do something to provide them with more skills or more confidence or anything we can do to help them out so that when they are finished or have completed these programs, that they can provide for themselves, their family, and that that would help raise their confidence and make them successful citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall.
Yeah, with the court programs they have, in addition to that, I'd like to reinstitute a peer jury that they have at the schools or used to have at the schools. So that way we can add another layer of it just from the youth where they start to get involved. Again, if we can prevent them from getting on any of the drugs or taking the drugs, then we have a benefit with that. So implementation from there. With the current programs, getting them the treatment, there's other new treatments that they're coming out for opioid addictions to where, again, when the doctors used to prescribe the pain medication, so you didn't have any pain after that. Now they're treating with managed pain. So we're able to limit that to keep them from being on it. But the new treatments that we can get people into is actually drugs that will keep the opiates from accepting to the beta receptors in the brain and things, so they don't get the highs. And if we can keep them off that, then that would be a benefit also, because then they're not going to more than likely take any of the drugs.
Thank you. Next question, starting with Mr. Mays. What is your opinion of the use of ankle bracelets / electronic monitoring?
Well, I think the use of them is something that is needed. To see that has been slashed out of the budget should raise concerns for everybody, especially the sheriff, because now we're talking about individuals who have been sentenced to home monitoring or GPS monitoring, and now we're having to run them back through the court system and make a decision on whether they go free or whether they actually get incarcerated. If they're incarcerated, of course, that raises our head count up, which means that we have to provide more housing for individuals. And if we could continue to utilize that, we can continue to keep an eye on them, and at the same time keep our numbers low within the correctional facility. And I just think it's a good way to save taxpayers some money.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall.
Yeah, the GPS monitoring was a program that shouldn't have been cut. The sheriff's office should have done maybe a little bit more just in pushing forward to try and help keep that, because the amount of money that the GPS program cost is costing us more to house those inmates. And like Mr. May said, we're either going to keep them in our facility, so it's going to raise our numbers and it's going to cost more, or we're going to let certain ones go and now we don't know where they're at or what they're doing. So we need to be able to track those people. And if we could have saved money by keeping them out of jail, by keeping them on the GPS and keeping that program, then we could have worked with the other county agencies a little bit better to make sure that we're doing it. And that's where the sheriff's office needs to be. If we can save money for the county as a whole, not just looking at our own budget, we need to look at the county as a whole, then we need to be able to help them out.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
Yeah, great points made so far. So I'll just approach it from a different angle that, of course, the electronic monitoring is under court services, so it's not under the sheriff's office, which is a point that we've been educating folks on as we've gone through the sheriff's campaign. But what we can do, like Mr. Tyndall said, is offer solutions or offer innovation. And I'm a big believer in jobs, jobs, jobs. So I would like to see us require people, if you're on electronic monitoring, you have to go get a job, and we'll help you get a job. But part of your salary is going to go pay for your electronic monitoring. So not only can we help save the system, we're giving them a leg up and we're giving them some accountability in their sentencing.
Thank you. Starting with you, Mr. Tyndall. Some of these are kind of hard to read. What is your position on asset forfeiture? If opposed, what problems do you see with the practice, and what steps and safeguards would you take to limit abuse related to the practice of asset forfeiture?
Asset forfeiture, I think, is a double-edged sword. You have your civil asset forfeiture and your criminal asset forfeiture. I'm a strong believer that asset forfeiture should be limited to the criminal side of it. So you arrest somebody, you hold their property, they go through the court process, and if they're convicted of it, then you can seize the property. On the civil side of it, instead of just taking it right away from them, with the limitations in the way the current law is structured, or had been and stuff, that you could take it easier with numerous types of things. So people lost their property, and it cost them more money trying to defend it. And if it was from a mistake or an incident or something else like that, sometimes they don't get it back when it was an honest mistake. It may not have been their fault, from any agency. You see it throughout the country where people get into it. There needs to be an oversight over that. The judiciary with the sheriff's office and the county board keeping an eye on the funds and how they're used for that. But I think asset forfeiture is a benefit as long as it's on the criminal side.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
Yes, asset forfeiture is essential for destabilizing major criminal organizations, and there are major criminal organizations at work in Kane County on a regular basis. Throughout my career, I have worked with asset forfeiture. I have seized over $10 million in assets from major criminal organizations working within Kane County. I have seen that when it comes to local asset forfeiture process, there are a great deal of standards in place to ensure due diligence is done and responsibility to the owner of the asset through the seizure process. There's actually 2 judges in place that ensure that proper procedure is followed and that probable cause is met and justice is done. Where I find that most of the issue arises is in the administration of the asset forfeiture funds. I had the honor of giving input to what is now Senate Bill 383 that came into law in July of 2017 that again locked down more stringent requirements on the front line seizing of property. Unfortunately, not on the administrative accountability. We have a lot more work to do there.
Thank you. Mr. Mays.
When it comes to asset forfeitures, I believe that the intent of the law was to stop individuals for reoccurring and redoing criminal activity. However, I think it fell short because we had individuals who was having property and money taken away from them, which they legitimately had gotten into their possession. And so when we have that happen and they have to go out and spend additional funds to try to regain what they've already have, it gets to the point where it doesn't make sense. You're spending $2,500 for an attorney to just recover $5,000, and so now you're about $7,500 out. And so I think asset forfeiture is fine. I like it more on the criminal side, simply because that means that there's somebody being charged for actually doing something wrong, and so through the court system, through the evidence standing up in court, that individual can be found guilty, and then those proceeds, if proven to come from the criminal act, that they can then take and utilize that for the agency to do whatever they do, but it needs to be done and it needs to be administered, and we need to have some accountability there.
Thank you. Okay, did we Mr. Hain?
Is it me? I'm up?
Okay, I lost track of.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Willie went last, so you got to go first.
Next question. Or who didn't answer the question? Mr. Tyndall.
No, I
Did you
answered.
answer it?
Oh, wait.
I answered it.
Yeah.
All 3 of us answered the question.
We're doing a round robin.
It's just who you want to give the next
Back
one
up
to.
here. Everybody answered it, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Next question, and we'll start with Mr. Mays. Most of the 10 western townships of Kane County are largely unincorporated areas. County sheriff's deputies are the only police. What can be done to increase patrols in those areas? So we're getting out of the jail, guys.
Yeah. Well, I think that the statement you made first off is true. However, when we look at the calls for services, normally the calls for services takes us away from the unincorporated area to the west side of the county and puts us on more so on the east side of the county. And one good thing about being at the sheriff's office for a while, I've been around, so I've seen a few things, and I've seen different programs come and go. I've seen us take and try to put a power shift in there to try to help those things along. And the one thing that we have not done is we have not really added additional bodies. And I think if we add some additional bodies, then we can actually try to set up a grid where we can assign people to certain areas so that those people are in those areas and so that the response time would not be as long. So I think that's one of the main issues. And I think we've done everything else we can, but we haven't put more people into the process.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall.
One of the issues that we currently have is just the staffing levels because our staffing is low, so we definitely need to address that to get them out into those unincorporated areas because that is the only law enforcement they have. The pockets that we have in the municipalities, we can get assistance from the other current municipalities that we have with it that are currently there. But looking to put additional people on the street, we need to make sure that we hire because we can be staffed up to 90. We're not currently at 90. We need to be able to get our numbers up and to make sure that we're maintaining those numbers and get the training through it. So once we have the personnel, then it's going to be easy to deploy those personnel and work on certain areas, targeted areas where we need, where there's high crime, and then the other areas. The other idea that I would put forth is we need to bring back our auxiliaries. The auxiliaries are limited by statute as to what they can actually do, mostly traffic-related type issues. But so many times, especially with the weather that we've had with the snow, the wind, the rains, where the power lines goes down, the trees go down, you get an accident. We end up tying up 2 or 3, sometimes 4 guys. You know, we had a plane, we had 5 people out there on our staff that those auxiliaries could take care of the traffic, and we'd have 1 officer there at the time.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
One of the first things I did when I launched my campaign website is I redesigned our patrol structure in our public safety division. So right now, folks, we still patrol Kane County the same way that we patrolled it in the late 70s and 80s, according to more veteran deputies' accounts. So think about the population change, the infrastructure change, the demographic change of Kane County since the 80s when Randall Road was a 2-lane dirt road in some parts, okay? Currently, it does not work. Currently, that's why we see response times 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes and above. So it was very important for me to take this map and redistrict it in a more efficient capacity. So it is reflective of our demographics, our population, and of course, our typical call volume.
Thank you. Along that note, this is about auxiliary police. So we'll start with Mr. Tyndall. Do you believe that an auxiliary police force could help the office better function? Why or why not? And we just heard a little bit about some of their limitations, so why don't you expand upon that?
Yeah, I believe the auxiliary program could, again, we used to have it in place before, and we hired a lot of those auxiliaries as our deputies, and they've been very beneficial. And that additional training that they get when they first come on was beneficial to them being successful on the road. When we implement it now, if I get elected as the sheriff and I implement it, there are numerous recently retired police officers that have just stepped off the force. They would be willing to come back and serve as auxiliary officers. They've got the training already. They would be the initial start. They know their role, and then we could start working on the force and building it up from there with trained personnel that know it, already working with the full-time personnel that we have. And again, their limited role that they could do is traffic-related issues. So they can't go out and handle domestics, but they could be there as a backup if we needed them to. But if we get wires down, they can sit on it, and we're not tying up a regular squad, full-time deputy, to be there. That needs to be out available for other calls that would be subject to.
Thank you. Mr. Hain?
Yeah, I'm certainly with Mr. Tyndall. I'm a big fan of the auxiliary proposition. However, the laws have changed dramatically over the 2-3 decades since we last had auxiliaries here in Kane County. So the requirements of certification are much more stringent on our badge wearing and firearm wearing personnel. So I love the idea of bringing back retired law enforcement professionals. I see one right back there I'd like to bring back. That retired from the sheriff's office. These people are well qualified. It'd be a part-time position, and it would greatly alleviate our staff, as well as creating an explorer or a cadet program that brought me up through my beginning law enforcement experiences. And we could also use that staff to support our public safety division as well.
Mr. Mays?
Yes, I see some benefit to it. And some years ago, and I can't remember exactly when I was attending Rabansi Community College, I did a paper on it, and I actually gave it to one of the lieutenants, and I never heard anything from it. But the issue was that you want to have the auxiliary, but you want to have it maybe in two different forms. You want to be able to have the seasoned guys who could probably come back and help, but then you also want to have the younger individuals who are interested in getting into law enforcement, so that you have a trade-off with the senior guys being able to teach the younger ones and give them some experience. And so I think it definitely could be supplement our manpower, because now when we have electric wires down, trees down, we're calling Office of Emergency Management, and if they don't have anybody, then we got people tied up on sitting there watching wires across the roadway or trees down. And so it would definitely be more efficient to have auxiliaries or even a cadet be out there doing those duties, so that we can utilize our fully trained officers to handle the calls for services.
Gotta tell you, I'm thinking of like Barney Fife. Be careful. No, I know the laws have changed, so it's not like Barney Fife anymore. So what is your plan for officer training, and how does it differ from the current program, starting with Mr. Mays?
My ideal officer training is that we, first off, over the last 4 years, we have not done anything to evaluate any of our officers. And we need to have a evaluation management system in place so that we can evaluate what their work ethic is. And I think based off of that, then you can take and look at the officer's skills and their desires as far as where it is they want to try to go with their career. And then we can sit down and develop a path, and that be done with the leadership, so that way we know that we're setting an individual on a certain path, and we're going to make sure that he's accountable for completing those tasks, and then make sure that we then give them the opportunity to use that task or that skill that they've learned in order to better serve the community.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall.
Yeah, the officer training that we have, once you get hired, if you've already had PTI, then you'll go into our field training officer program. If you haven't, you go through the school, police training officer school, and then through the field training officer program. We need to continue that, because we've recently had a lot of great guys that we've hired. We lose a lot of guys because of the pay scale that we have, so unfortunately we're a revolving door a little bit with training. But if we can keep up with those training assets, again, that we have, and mentor those, then we can have better officers. The critical part of it is learning the basics first. So when you come in, the basics is writing your tickets, doing accident reports, handling your certain calls. When you start getting into the specialty calls of the homicides, the home invasions, and other things, they need the veteran officers there. On the paramedic side, I was the EMS lead instructor, so I would teach the paramedic programs through the schools. We'd run them we would have a mentor program, and then we have a preceptor program. So the FTO program is kind of like the preceptor program, teaching them, making sure they're doing what they need to be doing. But then when you get into the furtherance of it, you need to have mentors there to watch them and help them. Unfortunately, they're being put in roles just because they want to be kept interested in new, that they don't have any mentors, and we're moving the other guys out.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
It is astounding to me that in the year 2018, our large public safety agency, the head public safety agency in Kane County, does not have a command staff member that oversees and sets guidelines for training of both corrections and public safety division. One position I would like to create by melding in two current command staff positions is the tactical commander. And not only would he be responsible for conducting threat assessments outside of our office walls, but also setting those standards within our office walls and ensuring that training is done. Those two most overview training components are stress-induced training to make sure that police officers are going to operate effectively and proficiently in violent encounters, and de-escalation training. De-escalation training is going to ensure that they're not going to use the use of force continuum improperly and ultimately result in loss of life or injury to an individual that does not need to occur.
Okay, on that note, starting with Mr. Hain, excluding the jail issue, what would you bring back to the office in a service area or division to address crime other than the drug-related criminal acts?
I'm going to refer back to it being the year 2018, and we are not currently addressing one of the most severe threats to our youth, and that is cyber crimes and cyber stalking. That division stopped in 2014 at the sheriff's office, and I recently sat down with a national expert on child sex crimes. And while we were sitting at the table, he pulled up this database, and he said, "Ron, right here I can show you by IP address how many people in Kane County are actively searching child pornography." And that number, as we sat there, was 110 at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday night of people searching child pornography in Kane County. He said, Ron, guess what? 97% of these people physically offend against a child in their lifetime, and we are not proactively investigating these crimes. That is first and foremost to bring back.
Thank you. Mr. Mays.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would revamp our computer forensics. Along with that, we had an individual prior to retiring who actually did the child exploitation work as well. And actually, Kane County Sheriff's Office was one of them that pioneered the effort in doing this to begin with. So I would definitely bring that position back, and then with that position, take and also have them responsible for child trafficking and child exploitation. And then also I would take and bring back the evidence and crime scene technicians, because we're not processing crime scenes the way we used to and catching evidence that we can utilize to actually convict people. And then the third thing I would do is bring back the crime analysis. I believe that we collect data and all we do is let it sit there. If we take the data that we collect and we utilize it to really try to figure out exactly what our hot areas are, what time those areas are hot, what days of the week, so that we can take all that information that we collect and utilize it to better serve the community by making sure that we put officers in those areas to try to effectively take care of crime.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall.
And just to build upon about what the other two have said, because numerous things have been cut from the sheriff's office, and unfortunately the public does not know that. Trying to make the budget, we've lost a lot of things. We've lost crime scene technicians. It was pushed back on the investigation unit to go out and process crime scenes, but we got half our investigation unit was disassembled too to put back on the street. When people leave, the person that used to do the cyber crime and the trafficking, that kind of stuff, was not filled to save money. We need to bring that person back. All these are critical functions, and the problem that the current administration that I see is they forget that the sheriff's office itself is a critical infrastructure. We need to be built, and we need to be solid in everything that we do, and we've lost so much experience just to trying to make the budget. But those are the issues that we have. So bringing back evidence technicians, getting their experience instead of just putting somebody in a position. We need somebody that's experienced in that position that's been moved out. We need to have the people come back in and investigate the cyber crimes. We need to keep the SROs in the school instead of pulling them out and making the schools pay 100% of their salary. That will help us with the bullying in the school and other issues that we have with certain issues.
Thank you. Last question. And we'll start with Mr. Tyndall. Does the jail have a job skills or job training program now for the detainees?
Currently, there's not a lot that they have just because of the skeleton staff that we do. On midnights, a lot of times they'll lock it down, or they'll have one officer going between the pods. So that's where you'll hear the one officer per 128 inmates, 64 in each group, and he's got a door between them that he's got to run back and forth. We definitely need a job skills program coming in. One of the things that could also be helpful for the jail is to bring back utilization of the trustee environment. So that way we can get the trustees that are there under the supervision of corrections officers or other facilities, send them out that are nonviolent ones that are short timers, and then have them do some work and build upon that. Or again, if we had the GPS monitoring, that would definitely help where we could build on it.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
Yeah, this is a topic I've been very outspoken on, and I began building a model for this in 2012 that I would like to plug into the jail, where we connect people with felonies on their records to local employers that are willing to hire them. While in the jail, you would get OSHA certification to apply to a manufacturing job, a forklift driver certification, because we've seen those two certifications as key components, and also building trades experience from the Fox Valley Building Trades Unions that have offered their support and expressed a strong interest in assisting the Kane County Jail in vocational skills programs. But I will say, to answer the question directly, I was recently at a forum speaking very in-depthly about my jobs program, and this guy was there at that one. And it was just he and I, and he said, we do have a jobs program. I had an employer who asked if they could interview inmates in the jail about 2 years ago, and I said, yes, they could. but there was no quantifiable data. He didn't know if they had ever come back to do it. So I think that answers as close as I can to the question.
Thank you. Mr. Mays.
I know currently they have what they call a tablets program within the jail, so that an inmate could be in there and could take classes online or through whatever method that they have set up. However, the problem with that is that normally when they get released, when they try to transfer the credits, they normally don't always transfer, or they may get the credits, but it won't be in the core area that they've been studying. And so my ideal is to work with the local community colleges as well as the universities to ensure that we can have people come in on tier and teach programs so that they can take and get the credit for it, so that when they do leave our walls and they leave incarceration and they re-enter into the community, that they have an opportunity to get a job. Because it's important for an individual to be able to provide for himself as well as his family. And when they can't do that, a lot of times their confidence is down, and which leads to a whole nother world of different problems. So I think by utilizing that, and not just utilizing that, just forklift or anything like that, but even look at where the jobs are coming from nowadays, which is normally from the STEM program. And so even maybe to take and try to teach them some coding, I think that would be good, and I think it would help them get a job that would pay a livable wage.
Thank you. And now we will go to our closing, and we'll start with Mr. Mays. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. Once again, I want to thank everyone for sitting here and listening to us. Thank the League of Women Voters. And as I said earlier, that leadership is very important. And as a leader and have operated in a leader capacity in pretty much most of my work life, I've always tried to make sure that I modeled the behavior that I'm expecting of people that work for me. My investment is in people. And when I invest in people, I do expect a return on my investment. I expect that they will take and make the good for themselves. And so I don't want to be right at the end of the day, but I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And I believe the right thing is investing in people, giving them opportunity to turn the corner if in fact they fell in the wrong direction, but also making those who have not, give them opportunity at a career path that would allow them to be treated with dignity and respect as well. I believe it's very important to be inclusive and have a diversified workforce, because I believe that that is our future, and that everything else that we went through or have gone through in this country is our past. And in order to do that, we have to allow people the opportunity to experience different jobs, and we need to, as a community, experience different people, cultures, so that we understand that at the end of the day, when we peel everything away, we all basically still want the same things. We want safe homes, we want good jobs, we want safe schools, we want to make sure our kids have good schools. And so all of us really want the same thing. So I think it's important that going forward, that we move forward in a manner that allows us to all be inclusive, and that everything that we do, that every change that we take, that we make sure that it brings value not only to the taxpayers and the community, but also to the agency as well. So I thank you for this time. My name is Willie Mays. If you take time to go out to my website, maysforsheriff.org. Sorry about that. I work midnight, so that's my alarm to wake up. My website is maysforsheriff.org. I have tutorials on there where you can actually hear people who not only just met me last year when I ran in 2014, but people who have known me for all my life and can witness to my character. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tyndall, your closing, please.
Yeah, thanks for hosting the event. Thanks for everybody for coming out and listening. Our hope is that we made the decision tough for you, but yet easy for you. You guys need to look at the candidates, look at their qualifications, look at the education experience that they have. If you look at those kind of things, then you'll see the capabilities that are and potential that's out there. Having a clear direction for the sheriff's office to move forward with, a clear path, so that way the personnel there understand what the mission is, and we can accomplish that mission and we can work together towards it, is one of the key goals that we have with it. Is the sheriff, you definitely need to have that rapport with the county board. And I've always said the meetings that they have, anything that is brought up in there should never be a surprise to the county board members. It should always be discussed ahead of time, so that way that they're not shocked when, oh my goodness, we're over budget, or we don't have the money, or we need some programs or something else. Constant communication from where you go. and the communication goes the other way with your personnel. Talking to them, listening to them, they're our greatest asset. I mean, the experience that they have there is overwhelming with it. We need to be able to listen to them. We need to have a continuous improvement team that we can put together, that we can listen to the guys from corrections, from court security, and from the road, so we can make things safer and more efficient. We're still documenting our payroll on paper cards. I created an electronic format that we can do it from the road, same with the scheduling, same with the rosters, everything else from the road, without ever having to go into the office. It's not even utilized for it. I'll still utilize it, and I'll send my stuff. I'll send it out of state, send my payroll card in to make sure we get paid. Those are the kinds of things that we need. It's just ABC management. My A is for accountability of the person in that office. What I've done, where we're going to go from there. Our B is our behavior, our past behavior, making sure that we're holding up to what's accountable and for the citizenry. And the C is the character and competence of our people. We need to have deputies, as well as me being if I was the sheriff, the character and the competence, my integrity and my capabilities to be able to do the job and do it correctly and be very effective with doing it. So if you do have questions, feel free to call me. My site, tyndallforsheriff.com, that you can go to. Again, thanks for coming, and thanks for sitting up here with these guys.
Thank you. Mr. Hain.
Happy to close this one out. So I hope one thing that really showed through in the last half hour we got to talk with you was all of our passion for this profession and for the Kane County Sheriff's Office. Lots of years of experience sitting up here, very diverse and dynamic careers, all from different backgrounds. And in about 11 days, there's only going to be, well, hopefully 2 of us remaining, but definitely one of us. And I will be just as honored to join either one of their campaigns as I would to have them join mine, to make sure that we incorporate all of our ideas and our diverse backgrounds to make Kane County Sheriff's Office a truly productive and progressive place. So what I have focused on throughout my campaign is to put forward clear and concise solutions to the serious problems we face. And of course, we don't have all the time in the world to cover this tonight, but I would like I would like to invite you to take a look at my website, HainForKaneSheriff.com. Pretty easy to remember, Hain for Kane, Sheriff.com, and check out those solutions. They're right up there on page 1. Hold your candidates accountable, know the experience, know the background, and let's build together to make a great Kane County going forward. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. There is a lot of experience up there at that table, and let's give them a round of applause. Thank all of you for coming. We appreciate it. Thank BATV Mike for filming us tonight, and thank the news media. I think, Brenda, are you the only one left? Brenda's the only one left? Oh, no, we have The Voice in the front row. Sorry. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for covering it. And you can vote in Batavia right down the hall. I believe it is 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, this week, and then again next week, prior to the March 20th election. So I urge you all to get out and vote, and I urge you all to take somebody with you. Somebody that might not be able to make it to the polls without help, somebody that may not be registered. You can have them register the day of the election on March 20th. It's important. Please go. Thank you very much.